Welcome to Open Show Los Angeles. We have three presenters today. Um, they will talk about their portfolio, which to me is very exciting. Can't wait to hear them talk about their work. Each presenter will have about 15 to 20 minutes per presentation, and there will be a little bit of a Q&A after each presenter. And then at the end, after three presenters are done, we will have a sort of a bigger Q&A, right? Depending on the time, but I think we always have enough time for that. So there will be sort of a Q&A at the end as well. I would encourage you to ask questions, to have a dialogue, with the artists. So if you can put your questions in the chat window, right? In your Zoom meeting, there's a chat button at the bottom, so that you can put your questions there or your comments or anything like that that you want to share with everyone. Okay. And for your questions, I will try to articulate them for you. Or sometimes I would let you ask those questions depending on what they are, okay? Um, and we love to see you. So if you like, you can leave the video on, but also make sure that you are muted just in case there are background noises and things like that. Um, and lastly, um, this Zoom meeting will be recorded. So I just wanted to give that disclosure, right? So that you know that that is being recorded, all right? So who said that? Same source. All right. Well, welcome, same source, Charles. And um, Charles is an alumni of Open Show LA. So welcome back. I'll go through a little bit about Open Show Los Angeles for those of you who don't know us. Just a couple of minutes, and then we can, after that, we can start the artist talk in earnest. Okay, so let me go ahead and share my little slideshow there, and then we can get going. Okay, I hope you all can see. Yeah. Okay, a little bit about Open Show. For those of you who don't know about Open Show, um, today's presenter is right here, Ara, Gabriella, and Mara, and we'll hear from them very soon. And Open Show is actually a global organization um, which has local chapters around the world. Um, Open Show started in San Francisco about maybe 12 years ago, and then LA is the second Open Show that got started. So we've been around for about 11 years, and you can see that these are all the locations that currently has a chapter of Open Show. So if it happens to be in those cities, you might see them holding Open Show event just like this one. So it's a regional organization. Basically, we have artist talks every 6 weeks, every 6 weeks to 8 weeks or so. And so we've been around for about 11 years now. And so we are happy to share visual stories uh, from photographers all over the world. Usually it was Los Angeles because we usually have in-person open shows, but for the last 2 years or so, we were lucky to be able to hear from folks from all over. So that's kind of nice in a way. And just a little bit about, we have a website, openshowla.com. You can always go there to see what's happening. And if you can please sign up for our mailing list so that you will know um, our open calls as well as what's going on as far as the next open show, okay? And then just a quick introduction. I'm Richard S. Chow. My handle is right here. And Jonas Yip, and that's his information. He is also here with us. Jonas has been around since the beginning of Open Show, so he's been around for a long time for Open Show. And both of us are obviously photographers, right? So we enjoy doing this for our community. All right, so that's about it. You can look at this website here to see our next set of events for the rest of 2022. Okay, all right. Thank you very much. And with no further ado, I will go ahead and unstop share, and I'll introduce the first presenter for today, who will be Ara. And Ara is a photographer and installation artist. He's interested in presenting marginalized communities and identities. So he often combines various mediums for his work. So he's also a curator and has published a few books. So you might want to check out his books. The series that he's going to share with us today is already in book form, I believe. So I'm sure he can talk about it more. So, and he lives in Los Angeles. So welcome, Ara.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Jonas and Richard, for accepting my work to be presented here. I'm a proud alumnus of Open Show way back when it used to be actually in real life. So as Richard was saying, I'm a photographer, installation artist, filmmaker, also curate a small gallery in Glendale, dealing with social justice issues. And a lot of my work has to do with that kind of work, social justice and identity and displacement. The work that I'm going to show today is a work that I did. It's published in book form, and that I did in Beirut. And so, a quick let me share my screen, and then. Can you see?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is the cover of my book that was just recently published by Verlag. And so, oops, it should not be moving forward. Why is that doing that? Sorry. This is kind of okay. It's kind of a complicated project for me that I returned. So, okay, I'm not sure why it's doing that. I'm sorry. It should not be moving forward. So we'll leave it like this, I guess. And so I was thinking about how to present this work because it's got a lot of history. It's got multiple generations really involved in the whole project. There's a return because I'm Armenian, Lebanese, and with a French education. And so I was displaced by the Lebanese Civil War and came to the United States. And this work I returned to Beirut to do this work and looking at what that displacement, sort of the afterlives of, let's say, if you could say that, afterlives of displacement of my own life. And in these sites where there was already displacement that had happened. And really, this is in Beirut, and you may not know where Beirut is or really care much, but I think it's kind of a global phenomenon now, that the displacement that people experience, be it from Central America, Mexico, or South America, across the globe right now, in the Ukraine, of course, all countries in the Middle East, even far east, there's displacement happening. So the fact that it's very specific to my story, and the fact that it's very much in one specific place, I think is kind of, in a way, can be seen to be secondary, while the issues of diaspora and displacement and what happens when you're multi-generationally dispossessed and move globally. You know, what does that kind of movement look like if you go back to look at where you came from? And so, and I was going to talk about this and hand wave a little bit, but I think what I'm going to do is read a shortened version of the postscript to my book, which kind of encapsulates where I come from. And then it's going to take maybe a couple of minutes to read this. And then I can, I can show some photos. I'm not a great reader, but I'll do my best here and read this to you. So I'm standing on a landing, a foyer on the second floor of a stone-built house here in the mountains above Beirut. A landing made of stone tiles and 4 wooden doors. Here I spent my summers as a child, and here now 40 years later on the same landing, I'm overcome with emotion. Among the silence of the tiles, I see myself, a past, a present, intertwined, interrupted, torn, inseparable. How did it begin? I'm a child and I'm running through woods among dark, thin trees, scattered pine cones. I'm climbing, reaching for the lower branches, hoisting myself up, clearing pathways of thorns, riding bikes on dirt over hills into rocks. I'm running, always running. I'm running on pavement now with my best friends at my heel. And we have fled school. I'm running past gardens with worn fences, strewn garbage, chaos and noise of cars, past the street hawkers, shoe salesmen, nail salons, men in neat suits and women in purple hats. We are running breathless and oblivious to the violence brewing all around us, about to engulf the city. Now we are running as a family in a taxi, speeding. My father tells us to get on the floor. We hear gunshots. We are careening down a deserted highway at ungodly speeds towards the airport. Now, years later, I have returned to Beirut. To look for what? A beginning, an end? What possible narrative? To peer down a chasm of time, an abyss deepened by war, ruins of a family, a gulf within the self. The Civil War has created a new city, yet it seems nothing has changed. I see narrow, chaotic neighborhoods falling apart, crippled by generations of violence, external and internal, the rush of life, stench of kebab and noise, of the kebab and trash, noise, dirt, wafting music, laughter, and joy. I see men, women, children, ghosts at once familiar and utterly foreign, community, defiant, breathing and vibrant, resilient, a place, an incessant, undying past. I see an invisible subterranean violence that can rise like a typhoon at any moment. I see a community, remnants of the genocide of 1915, exiles who settled here in Beirut to rebuild lives and homes. I see them now and still, 4 generations on, still absorbing cascading wars, economic collapse and disasters, still connected to their far-off homelands of Western Armenia. I hear a melodious, resonant language, my own Western Armenian, currently on the UN endangered languages list, a language on its deathbed, trying to reach across an even greater abyss to its beginning. I see myself. I try to articulate a response to this space, my space and community through which I move, talk, eat, curse its history, and marvel at its resilience and ability to laugh. I try to find a narrative or perhaps an end. So that's the kind of the background of the work. That's kind of what motivated me, that kind of layered background where you have a community that was displaced and living in the same neighborhoods and the same spaces for over 4 generations, where I was born and I left and I returned. And this is a picture of where I grew up when I was a child, actually up in the mountains. And here you kind of see the landscape of the space. And so to me, a lot of my work has some symbolic connections. It's very personal and symbolic in that way, where in my introduction, I spoke about meeting ghosts, meeting pasts that were there and they're not there, they're familiar and unfamiliar. So some of the images I make, and I don't photograph in that way, say, okay, I'm going to try to photograph a particular type of thing, but as many of you are photographers know, that after you take pictures start speaking to you, and they tell you kind of a lot of times what they're about, what they're talking about, where they're coming from. And so they take on other meanings. So this man was a former militiaman who fought in that neighborhood. So it's photographed in kind of a 5-block radius in Beirut, in this area called Burj. But as I said, I really think of it much more larger, in a global kind of sense, even though it's done very, very specifically in one place. So a lot of my work the articulation of that kind of layering is actually layered in the images themselves. And so there's a foreground, background, there's a kind of an ambiguity that's associated with that space, and the history that comes with that space, and my return to that space. And so my images kind of speak to that ambiguity, or things happening off the frame or the center of the frame, for instance, in this case, not actually being there, subverting kind of the standard way photography is done. Speaking to kind of this constant flux that's diaspora, that once you leave, once you're displaced, there's this constant flux of life. And a lot of my work is about that structure, what I call diasporic structure. It tries to get to that, speak to that. And as I was saying, there's still violence in that area. There's violence in many parts of the world, right? And so your kids are here playing with toy guns, so it looks like it's really actually real guns. So here you see Arabic, and you see actually French. You see in the street signs, there's French. So there's that part of it also. My education, as well as Beirut and Lebanon and the whole area, used to be a French mandate. It was colonized by the French. So there's that leftover colonialism too in the space. So here again, sort of the multiple layering and foreground, background that I'm looking to speak to this diasporic structure that I speak about. And here is an image of the neighborhood. And despite, I don't know if you've been following the news, that last year there was a big explosion in Beirut. That was like major front page news, right? But this work was done before that, I should say. So it was done, it's finished about a year before that. But you still get, despite the situation, and they had gone through civil war, plus there was war in Syria, and there was they absorbed, small country of Lebanon absorbed like 1.5 million refugees, but still they find moments of joy and laughter. Community, Armenian community is a Christian community, and so the church is an important part of that. Religiously, also more culturally and socially, really. This connects back to I used to actually climb up on these trees, and so this image kind of connects back to my sort of memories of my childhood that kind of got displaced and cut off, that I feel completely cut off from. That's the Armenian script. This is the cemetery. And so my process is kind of a random walk in that area where I interact, talk with people, a lot of talk with people, a lot of interaction, and then photographing my kind of a response to that space. Social and political organizations are key or places where community adheses together, community fabric is built and kept. And so this is in one of those spaces, one of those community centers. These are Syrian refugees. A theater group. Of course, family is like everything in these kinds of spaces. To be able to be resilient against constant violence and constant upheaval and political and social instability, the core unit is the family. And so the past is always present, as we know, and so that in that space, that history that I had mentioned, where that community that living in that space were exiled from Western Armenia and other parts of Armenia by the genocide done by the Turkish government of the time, 1950 to 1923. They have, their legacy is that genocide, and so politically, and Turkey still denies that they actually committed that genocide, and so that past is still very much present, and you can see it many different ways in that space. How am I doing on time, Richard? I'm good.
Yeah, you have a few minutes left. Yeah, fine.
Yeah, I'm almost done.
Yeah, that's good.
So it's intergenerational also, and here's family again with multiple generations coming together all the time. These are the ledgers of the Armenian cemetery. So there's a very specific cemetery, as in a lot of those countries. Every group, every nationality, every community has their own cemetery. So this is a ledger of all people who are buried in that cemetery. And this man here who has these huge books, he has these huge books dating back from the 1930s. And you could do a documentary on this man. He will like bring out these huge books and turn these huge pages. If you're looking for somebody to find their burial place, so you can leave a flower or something, he'll go through and he'll find anybody you're looking for if they're there. And then this is the final picture of my book also. The intergenerational presence is really the fabric, the thread that connects a lot of this work together for me, and a lot of the identities that I have, as I said, I return and I connect with people there. So is that good? I'm good in time, Richard? Yeah?
Yeah, I think so. You're good.
Yeah.
You have a few more? You have a few more to show, or?
No, I have this last picture that it shows the cover of the image, and you can buy my book if you're interested in my book on my website, or you can follow me on Instagram or Facebook. And so I should say also that the book was done in collaboration with a very well-known Armenian author, an author who writes in Western Armenian, the same language that was deracinated from Western Armenia. And he wrote about essentially the same thing, about the structure of diaspora, the afterlives of displacement. And so the book is a collaboration. And he wrote in Western Armenian, and the text is translated into English. And it's the first full-length featured English translation of a full-length work by him, translated by Tallinn Voskerichian and Christopher Millis. So that's also an important part of the book. It's a collaboration. Because as I mentioned also in my introduction, language is a big issue because of the deracination from indigenous lands that happened. Language is very difficult to sustain. So it's on the UN endangered list right now. So it was very important for me to pay homage to that, my language, and have him write something and include the original language. It was written in my book. And it was like a German publisher. They're like, what are we going to do with this script? We don't know. We can't read it. It's yours. You figure out the Armenian script and we'll do the rest. But I worked with a great designer and she kind of figured things out.
Yeah. Congratulations, by the way. Keenan Wernack is a good publisher, so that's great. The book, I've seen the book, is really nice. So all you guys, if you have a chance, take a look at it if you can. Thanks, Ara. There's a few questions already, but right off the bat, there might be more questions.
Oh, yeah.
I would encourage people to key that in. Ara, I was just wondering, what are some of the most interesting feedback that you got from this series after you've shown it in galleries and such? So can you share some of that with us? Maybe a couple minutes of that.
Yeah, sure. I've had a couple of reviews of the book, and what's interesting is like the reviewers have connected to like completely different parts. As I was doing the introduction, it's very layered. It's got many things happening. So the one reviewer connected, actually compared it to another similar book, and another reviewer connected to the fact of the return, that the return becomes the sort of the vehicle in which the work is expressed. Another person had connected to the diasporic part of it that I am always talking about. Let's see. And it's dark, this is my third book. And the first book that I did is very different in terms of look and feel and texture. And this is a very dark book. And I didn't set out to do a dark pictures. And as you notice, it's high contrast, very dark. But this is what, I think this is, as photographers, we kind of have to be open to that. You go into a space, you're responding to a space, responding to a people, to the landscape, to the architecture, and you have to kind of let it tell you what it's telling you. And so it turned out to be a kind of a very dark book. And that's also been pointed out, as opposed to my earlier work, which was a little bit more light. And so, what does that mean? What does that speak to? Does that speak to fact that maybe there's more hope? Before the earlier work, there was more hope and less hope here in Beirut, and in this the fact that the language there is maybe the last bastion of that particular dialect of Armenian. Is that part of it? Maybe, because when I was there and I felt some of that this is like, I don't know how long it's going to last.
Yeah, it's a good treatment. All right, Ara, there's a few questions in the chat window. Carl had asked, when you are photographing, back in Beirut, how were you received by the people that you're photographing at that time?
I was received very well. It's because there is this, I returned. So I knew a lot of people there. I actually had friends who I kept in touch with. No more family, because a lot of my family had passed away. So friends made introductions. Also, I know the language. I mean, I speak the language. I can't write in the language in the literary sense, but I speak the language. So when you have that connection of language, things open up very, very easily. So I was accepted without any issues whatsoever. So that also makes it, as you know, as a photographer, as a documentary photographer, that kind of openness is like key to making the images you want to make. So, and because it's personal, the work is personal. It's my own history. I think that makes this also something that creates more openness in the people, and because you're telling their story through your own connection to that story.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a really important snapshot of the culture that, during that time. And
Yeah,
yeah, you capture that quite,
that's
quite
true.
well.
I don't talk about that, the capturing of the moment and that historical moment, but that's also finally that's what documentary photography is. You're capturing a snapshot of that moment in time,
Yeah.
those few years.
Right. Jim asked, I see that you use people and objects in the near foreground. That's a very interesting compositional element.
Mhm.
Tell us why you do that.
So I was trying to kind of speak about that. So the complexity and the ambiguity of identity, I think, is connected to that in the way I try to represent. So I'm as I said, I'm partially French education, Armenian, Lebanese, with American, we came to the United States, and I completely absorbed major parts of the United States and American culture. So I'm just kind of this mixed, multi sort of dimensional identity. And I think maybe a lot of us are becoming that. A lot of us are who live in multiple cultures have that kind of existence now, which I call kind of diasporic structure. So how do you express that? How do you talk to that kind of structure through documentary photography? And this is kind of my way to create this ambiguity, this layering, this foreground background where you don't really know what's going on. You don't really see things very clearly. And so that to me, that speaks to my state of identity, my state of being. And, I think it's an unusual way to photograph maybe, but and you may say that trying to kind of address these issues as it with documentary photography may be a little bit of a difficult thing for documentary photography, and I think about that a lot. How do you represent this kind of multiplicity of lives and cultures and things, and um,
Yeah, there's certainly a complexity that you're trying to sort of portray and trying to kind of show it, in a two-dimensional image. So, yeah, I think that might be your style in this particular series because that's consistent from what I saw. So, you can sort of communicate, you know, to the viewer, right?
yes,
A
exactly.
consistent story, and they can sort of, you know, get something out of it. I think Kat Simmons, she asked this very similar question. I think you answered that, right, Kat?
Mhm.
If not, please raise your hand again. All right.
Yeah.
So, yeah. We'll cover Kat and Mara's question at the end, hopefully, because we're trying to cover some of the other presenters. So, Ara, you might want to take a look at the chat window so you can sort of go
Okay.
back and see and cover those questions a little bit later. So, all right, moving on. Thank you, Ara, for this chat.
Thank you.
Very
Thank
very
you for the
nice insight
opportunity.
into your work. So, thank you. Our next presenter is Gabriella, and she's a photographer and a model. She does a lot of studio work as well as portraits and other commercial projects. She's also working on her fine art portfolio, and she will share with us today sort of a very personal journey about her family, her parent, her mother. So I can't wait to hear about it. So, Gabriella, you're on mute though, just FYI.
I thought you did that. Okay, so I'm off mute now.
Sorry.
You can hear me, right?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay, and I guess I go into my screen share.
Yes.
All right. Share. Okay, and then I'll go here and make sure that you can see my slideshow.
Yes.
So a little bit about me. I am a Canadian American photographer, as you said, Richard. Worked in the fashion industry, still do. So I'm always projecting images and ideas. And for me to do a story like I did, which I've been working on my fine art. And Ara, that was so amazing, by the way. Love your black and whites. It was difficult for me because I was always creating what I wanted the people to see instead of capturing what I saw. So I'm now back in Los Angeles. I was living overseas for a while, and this is not my first open show. The first one I did was in 2018 when we were live. I was in San Diego, and I showed a completely different, it was also documentary story at that time. And that was a lot of fun. So I'm very happy to be back. Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Jonas, for having me. I just wanted to say that as an artist, I'm really excited that I've been getting noticed lately. And it's hard for me normally to talk about myself because I'm more of a visual person. I just like to put it out there, but I think it's important to talk about what we're doing. So I've received international accreditation for my creative boudoir portraits from Portrait Masters, which is an international competition. And in 2020, the Houston Center of Photography chose my work to show some also documentary photography that I was doing from Hollywood streets, the pandemic, at the beginning of the pandemic. And that show was togethering online. Most recently, I started venturing into the NFT marketplace and had an article published at the Royal Photographic Society's Women in Photography group in March. And I can send links, Richard, if you want. Those are some really interesting little things from someone who never knew anything about NFTs. And I don't know if that's even in anybody's watching their realm, but it's really something fascinating, something different. And then I also have an article coming out with another, again, with the Royal Photographic Society, which is based in England. And that will also be, that's florals and macro photography. So I shoot a little bit of everything. But as Richard said, this is a very personal project. It has to do with my mother. And my mother and I have always had this absolutely incredible connection. I left home very early when I was 17. So our connection was mostly over the telephone. I'm just gonna move. I wonder if I can move this bar. Okay, I can't. So in December of 2021, I really faced the music. And when I was in Canada, just before I left for England, there's my mother and I. This was just before I left for England. And this was one of the last times that I took her out in the car. And her eyes are always so bright and beautiful. This is her at her home. And as I said, shortly after, and that's Lake Ontario, my mother and I visited the lake. It's just yards from our home in Canada. And there is always something within her eyes that speaks volumes to my soul. And this photograph was taken through a window. She was sitting in the car and I was outside. I don't like to do a lot of Photoshop, so I really do enjoy shooting as is and shooting documentary style and not messing with it too much. I will be reading some of this as I'm going through some of the imagery. So just weeks after I left, my mother fell and hit her head after vomiting and passing out. She was taken to the hospital where she was diagnosed with pneumonia and then was immediately admitted. She has not since returned to her home. The home her and my father built from scratch on 2.5 acres of land, just yards from the north shores of Lake Ontario. That's her in the hospital. And now I'll just take you back to the beginning a little bit. That's my mother in her glory days. She was born in Tarzo, close to Vittorio Veneto in northern Italy, in the province of Treviso. She is the third eldest of 9 siblings, so it was a big family. And they emigrated to Canada in the late 1950s. My father followed shortly, and they were married. She didn't have the financial ability to have an education, an academic education. So she worked hard all her life, even though in our culture, the Italian culture, that was frowned upon, and it caused a lot of problems at home. She married my father in Toronto on September 19th, 1959, and continued to work to support him and our family until my father's death, which happened in 2020 at the age of 90, my father was. So let's see here. I mixed up some of my things. So this is the house as it is now. And this is actually kind to the state of the house, the neglect. And a year before, so my father's passing, little signs of my mother's encroaching dementia became increasingly hard to ignore. She was officially diagnosed with moderate stage dementia on September 17th, 2020, just 2 days before she would have celebrated her 61st wedding anniversary, and just 3 months after my father's death. The house was always so well cared for when my father was there, and very well manicured. And that is not at all what I found when I came back there in March of this year. So she was in the hospital, and my sister and I have 2 sisters, but my older sister and I went there and tried to clean up. Let me see if I can see here. Yeah, so the property in the house was always manicured with every detail cared for. And this is not what I found. It was so heartbreaking. And you could really see the connection of my mother's state of mind, because she was letting everything go and didn't seem to care if things were disarray, which was so non-typical of her. And I don't know if you are familiar with dementia, but there's different kinds. Alzheimer's is one of the most popular, or not popular, but the most common. And there are a few different kinds. And there's a wonderful website called healthline.com, and it has a very good reference page and describes it. I won't get into the details of it, but basically it's associated with the impaired ability to remember, think, or make decisions, and it interferes with doing everyday activities, including taking care of yourself and remembering family members and so on. She had lots and lots of books. She loved to read, and they were just piled everywhere, on the staircases, in the basement. There was not an inch of space in the house that really was free of clutter. I don't know if I captured it 100%, but there were things that had tags on them still, like that giraffe in the window. And I don't know if you can see all the little debris along with the little animals that she would pick up and collect. But we had mice running rampant in the house, and they're still there. We live on 2.5 acres, where their home was on 2.5 acres of land. And it was beautiful, as I said, manicured. And now you can see just the neglect, and just that it went wild. My mother kept my father's clothes, and they're still in the closet. All his belongings are still there. So she held on to things. I don't know how she did it. This is a prayer that my father would read. We're a Roman Catholic background. And his glasses, everything's sitting there, still almost like he was still there. She was, as I said, Roman Catholic. So this is at the church, the hymn book that she had. And this is the last time that she came to visit me in Los Angeles. I'm a brunette at that time. I changed my hair color a lot. And she was 67 in this photograph. And she's now 86. So there she is. And I think, what happened to that beautiful mind I had known? I discovered that it's still beautiful, but that she was letting go of it all, and she was happy to let it all go. That her mind is still beautiful, just different. And this is a picture of us all together. The last time she was in the house, and that we were there. And it's bringing me to tears. It's so difficult. But anyway, she's happy now. She's in a good place, and she's just let everything go. And it's amazing. Some people have a very difficult time when they have dementia, and they get really withdrawn. But my mother has done the complete opposite. And she's gotten very happy and very gregarious and very social. And so she's in a home right now. And she's doing quite well. She's healthy. And I get to see her, you know, whenever I pass through. I'll probably be going more often to visit her. But I've only been managing to go up there at least once a year in the last 10 years. And now trying to do maybe 2 or 3 times a year. And the photographs that I took were all not, I didn't manipulate them at all whatsoever. And let's see, I think that's the last one, yeah. So that's it, basically.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your personal journey with us. I think some of that likely will resonate with some of us, because we all have had, I have anyway, with aging parents. So yeah, it's certainly something that resonates with me, and certainly very personal. So thank you for sharing with us.
Yes.
Yeah.
I will stop the screen share. There you go.
Yeah. It's Ara said, what a wonderful tribute to your mother. There's a couple of questions.
Sure.
We can cover them now, and then we can certainly cover some at the end as well. Mara said, I'll ask, do you have a further goal with this body of work? I can see it potentially begin in a book, especially with the different sections. That's what she was asking.
Oh, wonderful. Yes, I liked what Ara's done, and I am working on some books. And this project was highlighted during Mental Health Week. I think it was back in the spring. I'm not quite sure. So I would like to be more involved in that area and to share the work and my story, because I think a lot of people can relate. It is a very common thing in families. It happens a lot. And I'm also looking at showing the work in print. I think it has some nice flow to it. So thanks for asking that question. Yes, I am at sort of the beginning of my artistic endeavors in the world of fine art and showing my work. So I'm excited to share more of it. And I have other projects too that I'm working on. This one will continue a little bit more each time I go back and visit my mother. So all these images were taken from December to April.
Of this year, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, December of 21 to 2022.
Right. Okay, cool. And there's a couple more. Kat Simmons says, this seems to be a project that documents your mother and your relationship to her as it relates to memory, identity, and time. Do you see this body of work serving your larger audience? In other words, what
the personal aspect of it serving a larger audience?
Yeah. Do you see this body of work serving your larger audience? In other words, what impact would you hope it might have on others?
Well, it is personal, but I think a lot of people can relate. So I would like, you know, it's hard for me sharing that stuff. So I think hopefully it'll help other people share their stories, because I think each individual has a unique, even though the disease may be the same or similar, we all go through it differently. Watching my Italian immigrant parents who built this house from scratch, was so well manicured. My father was so meticulous about it, and watching it, dissolve and change and turn into something else. And that's why I said a beautiful mind. It's still beautiful, but it's shifted and changed, which is hard for me to grasp because I have not been at home for so long. And to go back and see it flip. My sister's been there, so she's watched it gradually go. And I think for me, the personal journey of just feeling disconnected for so long, and then maybe the story behind it is how important connection is to our families. And that's, something that I'm revisiting now with this story, because I was really disconnected and traveling and doing other things. And this brought me right back. Even though the relationship has changed dramatically, I feel that she's not the same woman that I know, but somehow I can still feel that connection soul to soul. But my mother, as I knew her, is now a child and, is not able to connect with me on that level that I was used to. So I think, yes, did I answer the question?
I think so. Yeah. Thank you.
I think so.
Yeah. Gabriella, there are maybe one more question in the chat window that we're going to cover at the end. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
You might want to take a look at that. So I wanted to make sure that we hear from Mara. Also have a very, very unique and interesting portfolio. She has been in the fine art photography world for a long time, over 10 years, I guess. And she's also an educator, a teacher. She's based in Detroit, and she likes to do alternative photography, which is very, very cool, actually. So the series that she's sharing with us today have had a solo, I believe. So, and I'm can't wait to hear more.
Okay, awesome. Here, let me share my screen. Hi, everybody. How are you guys doing? Let's see. Okay, so yes, hi, I'm Ara Magyarosi-Laytner. I'm an artist and educator. I am based just a little bit outside of Detroit, Michigan. This is my first time doing Open Show LA, and I'm actually really happy that it's virtual because it means that I can actually participate, which is really part of my goal. One of my goals of doing this is that I want to get my work in front of more regions and more people in more different areas. One of my goals over the past few years was to try to get my work in outside of Detroit as much as possible. And so this is just another opportunity to do that and to have more conversations about the work. So I am a recent MFA graduate from the Savannah College of Art and Design. And I'm also the founder and a curator and artist as a part of the Silver Water Collective, which is a group of 10 women fine art photographers that are located across the United States and also in Canada. And we're all focused in different areas of fine art photography. And we met virtually during the pandemic as a part of that program. And so we are doing shows and things like that together. So I've shown this work on its own quite a bit. Over the past few years, the work's been shown in different areas in the United States and portions, as well as in France and Hungary and Italy, as well as being as a overarching larger show during my thesis presentation in Savannah, Georgia earlier this year, which is all super cool. So the work is called The Untended Garden. And I usually start off, let me actually make it so that we can view it as a slideshow, because that would be important. Okay, so so the work is called The Untended Garden. And I usually start off the conversation by reading a little poem by Rupi Kaur. So this is one of the guiding thoughts that I have with this body of work. So it's an excerpt from Timeless, and it goes, "They convinced me I only had a few good years left before I was replaced by a girl younger than me, as though men yield power with age and women grow into irrelevance, but they can keep their lies, for I've just gotten started. And so the story of the untended garden is that it's a visual reflection that's structured into 3 acts. And I structured it that way, almost like a play. Plays are usually structured with introduction and establishing during the first act. And then the second act goes through a major transformation. And then the third act comes to a resolution. And so the untended garden starts off with the first act, which we're looking at right now, one of the images from the first act, and we're going to go through the 3, the expectations of women as informed by society and culture. And then it goes into the transformation that women reach as they break through during their coming of age. And then it ends in the third act in the resolution of self that comes from the acceptance of flaws and the reality of aging. And so this is all starting and coming from the idea that I was having a hard time with my own personal coming of age and having this resolution between the way that I saw myself and the way that society was telling me to see myself. And so I wanted to make sure that I wanted to really explore this. So this image in particular, I've had a lot of influences in this work, but this is one that has a very specific one. So this image called The Coming of Age is a reference to Michelangelo in the Sistine Chapel. And so the image of the hand of God and the transformation of life from God to Adam, this is referencing that, whereas the older women represented by the garden rose on the left are transferring their knowledge and information to the younger women on the right. So this work started off really by I started off a few years back I was watching a ton of artist talks during the pandemic virtually, like this one. I was really into it, which is why I wanted to do this. And I was watching one with SBE, and it was from Nick Shepard, and he said this statement that really resounded with me. And it was this idea that untended gardens gather dust. And I had this really visceral reaction where I went, am I an untended garden? And then what does that mean? Right. And so I started really thinking about and thinking through what that meant. And I explored this in so many different multitudes of ways. So the goal of the first act is really looking at this cycle and the cyclical nature of a garden and how it, how those roots, new growth, flowering, seeds, death, and then the eventual rebirth replicates that cyclical nature of women and aging across time. So some of the images are comparisons to each other, like these two in particular, and then some of them are structured that they work together or they have visual comparisons inside of them. And these are all created from exploring the different expectations that women have been passed down throughout time of what they are expected to do. And the plants are very specifically shown in varying states of decay and of life, death, all the way through. This image is called Confidence, and it's representing that idea of women being the little itty bitty leaf traveling through all of the pressure that's happening on the outside of them in society, of telling them who to be and how that pressure is making them feel smaller and smaller and smaller throughout time. And this idea of how this culture of expectation influence women's view of themselves overall. So these particular images, the next few are from a little quartet that are seen together. This one is called To Cut, and it's the idea of how, dealing with hair, dealing with having to pluck hair or shave hair or do these kinds of things, how these expectations, what is feminine, what is not, what do we do because we want to, what do we do because we're told to. And those are very, those structures and ideas are very integral to what is taught to women as very small children, and whether or not that is okay and whether or not that is things that we actually want to deal with. This one's called to Primp, and it's from the same group. So some of the other artists that I was paying attention to during Act 1 is Alberto Morel and Flowers for Lisa, because he was creating these images of flowers that were really he was creating them as love letters, but they were showing this idea of this passage of time and death. And he's very experimental with his work, which I am as well. So these images, almost all the images in the entire series are made through an alternative process technique called a hand sanitizer transfer. So what I'm doing is doing an inkjet emulsion that then I'm transferring using the alcohol and hand sanitizer onto a more porous paper. And so that's what's giving it these brush strokes and these things that this texture element as well, and gives it that painterly kind of view. That's not something that I'm doing in Photoshop. I'm doing those physically. Another artist that I'm also referencing here is Anna Atkins, because of her direct contact method. And so these are a kind of like modernized riff on what on those first cyanotypes. I was shooting them through a light box from below, and so they were made very specifically to reference that work. This is To Wed, which is referencing the fact that women are taught from very small babies that their end goal should be marriage. And then also this one, which is named Failure of Purpose, which is, I thought it was important. If you look at most projects that are created about women, they tend to be created in conjunction with motherhood. And although I can see why, I think that takes something away a little bit from the creation of work that is, or take something away from the women who choose not to or cannot be mothers. And so this image in particular is referencing how the menstrual cycle is, we're essentially being told from month to month that we're failing what our bodies are telling us that we're supposed to do, which is have babies. Okay, so that was Act 1. Now we move into Act 2, which Act 2 is meant to be seen together as a group, but I'm also showing them individually as well. And Act 2 is the idea of this transformation. And they're created by layering multiple images from a garden over top of each other to replicate this transformation that's happening with women during the coming of age. And when I was doing research for my thesis, I was reading that many people can see the coming of age. And the idea of the coming of age is when girls believe they are women internally. Right. And so that can happen anywhere between the age of 30 to the age of 70. You have no idea. It's a personal thing that happens, but it's a transformation that happens very specifically within women to do so. And so that idea of what point do girls decide that they're women and what has to happen with that transformation over time. So some of the references that I'm talking about in this work is Uta Barth and her work with Nowhere Near, because she created series of pairing diptychs together that showed the same window in a multitude of ways and showed a passage of time. And then also one of my classmates and fellow Silver Water Collective members, Marcy Kindred, did a series of work called Inscape. And she was playing with the idea of how both past and present can exist within one shared space and landscape. And I was referencing that in this particular group of work as well. So although these ones are shot outside on location, they're not showing exactly what's really happening in real time, because I'm also shooting through mirrored glass. I'm extremely experimental as an artist. And I was shooting through mirrors and causing refractions and reflections, and then I was layering things over top of each other. So this is not what you would actually be looking at if you were looking at this in real life. This is something that's essentially happening in almost like another space and time, right? This is not happening in reality, it's happening somewhere else. And so this is representative of what's happening internally. Okay, so trying to make sure I'm good on time and stuff. Okay, so Act 3. This is the section that is about reality, and this is about the resolution of self that comes within the acceptance of flaws in reality. So these are self-portraits. These are created through, once again, hand sanitizer transfers, but then they are re-photographed with floral elements and botanical elements placed on top. So the actual prints have both this texture quality to them and then the three-dimensionality of the photo of the botanical elements all within the same print. So one of the things that is important to think about within the set of work is how the photograph has been used historically. And it's the idea of that it's been utilized to show this ideal version of what a person would like to be rather than necessarily exactly who they are. And so and also in a response to like the idea of the male gaze, and I turned the camera back on myself to really show the reality of where I was at in this resolution of who I am exactly at this moment in time. So I made sure to photograph the parts about myself that, quite frankly, I don't like or didn't like before this point. And the parts about myself that were showing aging. So like, for example, in this, I was photographing the gray hairs that I had in the previous image. I was photographing my back and like my side profile. Here I'm photographing the different wrinkles and different things on my back. And I'm going through this process of not only like doing the transfer and doing, placing the photographs on top and rephotographing and making it into this fully transformative process where I then am really turning this work into something that I view the work as beautiful. So then I must inherently view that part of me as beautiful throughout this transformation. So I'm handling it in a lot of different ways. There are specifically a few artists that I'm really paying attention to in this particular set of work. One is Julia Margaret Cameron, because I think it's hard to talk about women without talking about historically one of the first photographers that really talked about women and really photographed women in like a more ethereal type of way. She was very much an innovator, and she used curiosity and drive to experiment. Additionally, I am also referencing B. Nettles, who made huge like bodies of work that were in book form, that pushed really the boundaries of photography within the context of the quick print, and made work that was about identity and womanhood and motherhood and time and memory. She pulls from her own personal experiences and makes self-portraits. And then additionally, I was making sure to also reference Sig Harvey, who just came out with a book about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, called Blue Violet, that's already sold out of its third print. She's crazy. Like, she's crazy in a good way. And her work is amazing. Her work is really about gardens and identity, and she is fully engaged in using the five senses and using the idea of flowers to like convey who people are within time. So I was shooting with a specific lens that it's called a Lens Baby velvet lens, which has a softening quality to it. I was doing that even before the initial transfer, because I was essentially softening my own viewpoint towards myself while I was doing this. And in a way, I mean, this is both a very private set of work, but also I'm forcing it to be a public set of work, because I've had a lot of conversations with people that seeing this helps them, because they can see themselves in this too, because oftentimes a lot of people aren't necessarily shooting their bodies if their bodies look like mine. Let's see something else. So I do think that overall, I think we're coming up pretty close to the end here. I do think that overall the experimental nature of photography makes it really critical for women, especially in taking back their own personal power in the study of identity. And I think that by utilizing all these different types of processes that I'm using, and by experimenting in these ways, I'm essentially snatching back that personal power. And truly, ultimately speaking, at the heart of this work, the Untended Garden is about this universality of transforming identity and gaining the wisdom to view flaws as strengths overall. And I think that's it. Hopefully I did okay.
Very cool, Mara. It was very insightful, very interesting work, and the way you approach different materials and different mediums, that's really engaging and different.
Thank you.
So that's cool. I see that some of these are pretty big in a gallery setting. So you make them digital and you print them.
Yes. So they are these ones are 17 by 25. These ones are 17 by 25. And then Act 2, the ones that are these ones, they're 17 by 55. So they're actually intended to be the size of a full-length mirror, but turned sideways to indicate a timeline.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
So yes, very intentional. Next steps with the project is I'm contemplating making a book with it. I just have to, like, I'm doing all the research right now, and it's a whole lot of stuff. So I'm trying to figure that process out. So that's really the next step of the work right now.
Yeah, it's very organic. I think you have a lot of options there. There's a lot of materials to work with. You should take a look at the chat. A lot of nice comments and references, so that's great. Kat does have a question. Why did you use transfers instead, or of just giving them on the original paper? What does that step of your process contribute to
Okay,
your
so
overall content?
I know that I shouldn't say this, but one, because I like transfers and that's just something that I really like to do. But also, I think that having that transfer as a step removed the photograph from the originality, an extra step. In the first act, it was really about putting it as a essentially grounding these expectations historically, right? And so the view of that particular body of that particular act of work, that type of treatment of the images makes it look a little bit more like paintings and historical in that way. As far as the Act 3 set of work, the transfers were part of that transformative process to kind of continuously remove me and my own opinions of me from the work. So as I was going through the process, like I would go through and then I'd go, okay, I like the transfer of this photograph. Okay, so then we layer the flowers on top. That's another step removed, to eventually make me feel better in general, right, about where I was at that moment in time. Hopefully that answers it, Kat.
That's interesting. I was just curious. Maybe I'm afraid to ask. Is there an Act 4?
No, there's not an Act 4 right now. I've thought about it, but no, there's not an Act 4. I do really feel clean about the 3 acts right now, especially I like them. When I showed them, Act 1 and Act 2 were in the same room, and then you walked into Act 3 and it was an additional room, which was really a cool way to do it. And I'm looking continuously for more spaces that I can do something like that, like have that kind of transformative experience with people, because it was really a cool experience to have in more places than just Georgia. Like I'm currently looking around in Detroit right now to have it, but I'm open to try other stuff too. So it's just everything's moving around.
Yeah, that's cool. Hey, Ara has a question. In this Act 2, the work seems to be continuous as well as fragmented.
Yes.
Does that dichotomy important for you and your work?
Yes, because I think that this process is continuous, right? I mean, one day you can feel like solidly confident in your womanhood, and the next day you can feel like you're 12 again, right? It's all very much a process that takes time. And so it's a multi-layered situation, right? That as you're going through, you're trying to figure things out, right? And so yeah, that those layerings and like having those pauses of that negative space of a breath, whereas then other things start to feel more chaotic in that rhythm that goes between the two, that's very indicative of how the actual process of coming of age feels.
Cool. Yep. Yeah, there's a couple more kudos to you. So Mara, you take a look. And Chris made a comment, I guess. I wasn't sure if that's a question. The transfers also feel symbolic of current processing, of air processing. Maybe that's just a comment. What are your thoughts, Mara?
Air processing?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Airbrushing. There we go. Okay. I was like, air processing. I'm not sure.
Airbrushing. No, he meant, oh, I see. It was a typo. It's airbrushing.
Airbrushing. I'm not necessarily specifically referencing airbrushing, but I can definitely see where you're pulling that from. My dad was an airbrush artist for a good period of time in my childhood, so that's an interesting reference that made sense. I did see that somebody asked about my palette. So my palette is incredibly specific. It is because I wanted to make this the girliest thing you ever had to look at. I wanted to do that very purposefully. Women are told from a very young age, like, this idea, oh, pink is just for girls. Oh, it's kind of weak. Oh, this kind of vibe. And I wanted to make sure that my palette both showed those colors that were feminine in nature, right? But also showing and depicting this strength.
Good answer, as they say. All right.
I tried.
Let's see. I'm kind of look and see if there's anything new came in. I know that we had a couple of questions from before that we can try to cover. We have about we're using our meeting time wisely today. Let's see. I'm going backwards here. Larry's had a question for Gabriella. Let's see. I was wondering if I can unmute Larry so that you can ask it. You can unmute yourself, Larry.
Hey there, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hey,
yeah, go ahead.
Larry Brownstein, how you doing, Richard?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much,
Good.
Larry, for joining.
Yeah, so I went to Gabriella's website and your boudoir photography is amazing. And it's extraordinary to me how different it is from what you showed today. One is very technical and very studio based, and the other is very intuitive and documentary. So do you find challenges going back and forth from one to the other? Is it fun to go back and forth from one to the other? What comes to mind?
I just answered you, and I'm thrilled that you noticed that you went to my website. And it's been difficult for me because I do so many different types of photography for people to, and I think this, Mara, this might relate to being a woman, how, we need to be put into sort of a box or some type, or, it's not just women, but it's what is it that you do and who are you? And so Larry, I am a visual artist. I have been since I was little. I was winning drawing competitions. I went to the OCAD University in Toronto. I didn't talk about that. I love visuals, and I'm not even that keen on video. It's stills, and even putting stills together. So whether I'm shooting boudoir, whether I'm shooting documentary stuff that's really personal and really heartfelt, which is the hardest thing for me to shoot, by the way. It's easy for me to go in and try to manipulate something and bring something, or even shoot abstracts. Like Mara, I shoot florals as well. And I loved your abstractness with all that. So I want people to say, oh my God, this woman, Gabriella, is like a maniac, creative, visual artist that uses photography as her medium. And I love all of it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry.
Yeah, very nice. Okay. Let's see if any one of you have a question that you want to ask, go ahead and try to unmute yourself. Because at the end, I wanted to be more interactive. When we used to do this in person, there's a lot of, dialogue going on. But anyone want to unmute yourself and ask?
I can say something.
What?
It was interesting. I went to school with Mara, and even though I've kind of seen her process, to hear her speak about it in this way is so much more like powerful, because I think when she was going through making the work, to see her coming up with the ideas was interesting, but to hear her in its entirety and coming to full fruition, I was really impressed, Mara. So I just want to say kudos to you. And also, I'm a fellow OCAD alumni too, so yay.
I'm wondering if you were going to bring that up.
but no, I think yeah.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. I definitely was trying to figure out how to it's it's hard when you go through a process of making work for such a long time, right? Or like making a body of work and you're married to it, right? It's kind of hard to figure out how to speak about it in a succinct way in a short buttoned up period of time. I could talk about it forever, I feel like, but I wanted to make sure that I was giving us the whole, making it succinct so that people that are just newly introduced could understand. So I'm glad that it came across in a good way.
Yeah, yeah, Mara used to have a, the story is sort of cohesive, so that's
Thank
fine.
you.
That's great.
I appreciate it.
All right, anybody else have a comment or question? I want to make sure that we cover all the questions that we didn't get to, but I forgot.
I have a
They
question.
are. I'm looking back to see if I missed something. Go
Can
ahead.
I ask Ara something? Is he still there?
He's here.
Okay. Um, your black and whites have this beautiful quality to them. How do you shoot them? And are they a digital or are they film? And what's your process?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I didn't mention that I meant to, but I use film for long-term projects, and so this was all shot on film. People remember Tri-X and T-Max 3200, and in the middle of this project, T-Max 3200 kind of like became really expensive, and so I couldn't use it anymore. So I was using Tri-X, and to me, that issue is really important because it's really about the instrument. There are a lot of photographers here, and everybody has probably their own opinion. But to me, the instrument is everything. When you're connecting, when you're in the street, you're talking and you're responding. You're taking photographs of the landscape, of the people, of the architecture, of the sounds and the sights. That's all coming into you. That instrument that you use is really critical for that connection. And so I've developed this relationship with my camera, and it's a film camera. It's a very basic, no meter, no nothing, kind of just a black box.
Is it a larger format camera, or is it just
no,
is it like
it's an Olympus OM1,
okay.
basically. Okay. What it is. Yeah, it's a 35 millimeter,
35,
small, lightweight, and very minimized. That's at least my approach, to minimize that distance between you and whatever you're photographing. For this particular subject, for this particular project. I've done other projects where it's larger format, tripod and things, it all depends on the project. Then I also do digital work, whenever, depending on the project.
I just thought that there was such a beauty and elegance, because a lot of my work revolves around beauty. It's hard for me to not photograph things that aren't pretty. Mm-hmm. You managed to, in my opinion, photograph these very difficult subjects, but the photographs themselves, the quality of them and the imagery, like the face that was really up close and there was a face behind it, it was a little bit blurry, was so elegant and beautiful, even though it was the realism behind it was in stark contrast. So I thought that really captured my attention throughout your work. Thank you so much. I think that's part of what we want to do, and to when we're dealing with difficult subjects, to elevate them in a way, to make them poetic. And I think your work also does that. That's right. Yeah, the house that's completely falling apart, you've rendered in a kind of poetic way. Yeah, that's part of what we do as photographers, as image makers, is to create poetry, even though our histories and our subjects may not be very easily to address. Yep. It's very, very cool that we can resonate our work, among each other. And Ara, I like the graininess. Because I noticed there are grain, inherent in the film. Yeah, that's a lot of it is pushed to 3200, 6400 even. No, it's all available light. And also the fact that you're trying to sort of take a snapshot, for people from years back, so it give you this nostalgic feeling. This is from the past, sort of. Even though you took it like in a few years ago, but great. Right. Thank you. All right. Good. The next open show is probably, let's see, in August, September, maybe somewhere around that time. So keep an eye out for our email for the next event. We at some point we're gonna try to do it a hybrid
situation where we have in person and also Zoom. Hopefully we can make that happen, because we do see benefits of having folks that are not in Los Angeles or nearby, because we got people from San Diego and Orange County that comes up sometimes, or even from Ventura County coming down to LA. But so we're trying to do a hybrid thing. So thank you, the presenters, Mara, Ara, Gabriella. Cool stuff, very interesting work, and each portfolio is very unique, and it tells a story, so that's cool. And
thank you very much for this beautiful opportunity. This is really great. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Mara. Yeah, follow us, and congratulations on your collective. I think a lot of stuff is going to happen there. Keep us posted. We are happy to post your news in Open Show social media, but just let us know, Ara, Mara, and Gabriella, now that you're out today, so you can let us know what's going on with you guys, and we can post it for you. Alrighty. Let's see, what time is it? It's right at 7:33.
We're so good. Look at us three. We did it.
We're right on time.
We did.
Thank you
everyone for coming.
Thank you, Richard and Jonas, and everybody for attending.
Yeah, thank you.
It was nice meeting you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Presenters, if you can stick around for 2 more minutes.